WhiteFlame, Rise of the Dragon War. WhiteFlame, Rise of the Dragon War. Chapter 1. The Shattered Sky. Snow fell in silence over Eldavar, blanketing the northern cliffs in pale white. The wind whistled through the broken towers of a long-forgotten watchpost, where no sentries stood anymore. Not since the Iron Claw banners vanished from the sky decades ago. The world had moved on, quiet, scarred, surviving. Until today. The silence broke with a distant scream. It wasn't human. Kael heard it before he saw it. A deep, tearing howl that echoed down the valley like a storm chasing its prey. He dropped the bundle of firewood from his arms, sending sticks scattering across the frozen ground, and turned his eyes to the sky. What he saw didn't belong in this world anymore. A shadow, massive and winged, split the clouds like a wound. It swept across the pale sky, darkening the sun with leathery wings that spanned longer than a longship. Behind it, smaller shapes followed, 4, maybe 5. They flew in formation, banking low toward the western ridge where smoke now rose in thin, black spirals. The village of Havenheim. Kael didn't think. He ran. Boots slipped on the icy path as he climbed the ridge above the clearing. From there, he could see it clearly. Havenheim burned. Thatched roofs collapsed under fire. Screams rose. The Iron Claws had returned, and they brought something new with them. Dragons. But these weren't the dragons from the Order's old songs. These were twisted things, blackened and heavy, with sharp metal embedded into their hides. Their tails whipped like spears. Their eyes glowed red like coals in a forge. And on their backs, riders in bone and iron armor guided them with chained reins and cruel spears. Kael stood frozen, not in fear, but in disbelief. They were real. For years, the WhiteFlame Order had whispered about the return of dragons. Scholars claimed the bones in the mountains told stories, that the blood of the past still waited beneath the ice. But no one believed it anymore. Not even Kael, who was raised in the shadow of the Order's crystal towers. Now, disbelief was a luxury he could no longer afford. A scream snapped him back, this time human. He ran again, down the icy slope, leaping fallen branches and skidding over frozen moss. Every breath burned in his lungs. His legs ached. But he didn't stop. He had to reach the sanctuary. The sanctuary of Aetherhall stood in the valley like a shard of light, carved from living crystal and bound with singing stone. Its towers pulsed softly with energy, humming with the old songs of the WhiteFlame. Within, the remaining members of the Order lived in quiet exile, guardians of a past the world had forgotten. Kael burst through the southern gate, panting, half covered in frost and mud. "Dragons!" he shouted. 2 guardians stepped forward, clad in light steel armor with fur-lined cloaks trailing behind them. Their faces tightened as Kael spoke again, this time slower. "They've returned, 5 of them, black as ash, flying over Havenheim. It's burning." The taller guardian, Melric, nodded grimly and turned to the alarm bell. He pulled the leather cord, and a deep, resonant chime echoed through the halls. Within moments, the sanctuary came alive. High in the central spire, Seer Vylara watched the flames rise from Havenheim. Her silver eyes narrowed. She had seen this before, years ago, in the crystal pool's reflection. A storm of wings, fire devouring the north. And in the heart of it, a dragon unlike any born in the last age. "They've awakened something ancient," she murmured, her voice brittle like thin ice. A young acolyte stepped forward. "Seer, should we activate the forge?" Valara turned slowly. "Not yet. There may still be time. But the prophecies—" "The prophecies are riddles," she cut him off. "What we saw was a warning, not a command. And yet, the fire rises all the same." She looked to the east, where snow fell untouched upon a distant peak. Deep beneath that mountain, sealed behind starlit wards, something slept. A dragon, a different kind. A choice. By nightfall, Havenheim was gone. Smoke drifted across the fjords like morning veils. Kael stood at the edge of the high bluff, watching what remained of his childhood home. He knew people down there, farmers, craftsmen, children. They never stood a chance. Beside him, Malric lowered a spyglass. They didn't just burn it. They took something. Kael looked at him. Took what? There were tracks near the cliffside. Heavy ones, not human. Kael's brow furrowed. Why? Malric's jaw clenched. That's what worries me. Later that night, Kael wandered the outer chambers of the sanctuary. The halls whispered with echoes, some from memories, others from things deeper. The sanctuary was alive in its own quiet way. It responded to emotion, to energy, to bloodlines. He often felt it hum under his skin when he walked alone. He entered the Hall of Remembrance. Tall, crystal obelisks lined the walls, each one holding memories, visions of dragonkind from ages past. Some were battles, some were births, some were endings. He placed his hand on one. A vision sparked. Wings white as moonlight soared over ice. Below, black dragons tore through mountains with fire that froze instead of burned. Screams filled the air, not of fear, but of rage. Brother turned on brother, light against shadow, and then silence. The ice closed in. Kael staggered back, breath caught in his chest. The past was not gone. It was returning. Chapter 2. The Last Egg. Beneath Mount Vetra, the air was warm and dry, thick with the scent of quartz dust and ancient metal. The tunnels here didn't echo. They absorbed sound like they were alive, listening to every word spoken in the dark. Seer Valara led the way. She walked slowly, her hands trailing along the etched walls of the sacred passage, where glowing runes pulsed faintly with blue-white light. Behind her, Kael followed in silence, heart still thudding from the day's horrors. A handful of guardians marched behind him, Malric among them, each bearing light steel weapons and breath masks to shield against the deeper air. "Why bring me?" Kael asked. Valara didn't stop walking. "Because the sanctuary called you." "That's not an answer. It is the only answer I have." She reached a final archway where two enormous doors stood carved into the mountain's heart. Crystal and obsidian fused like frozen lightning. At the center was the symbol of the WhiteFlame Order, a dragon curled around a rising sun. With a quiet word in the old tongue, Valara placed her hand upon the center. The doors responded. Runes flared, locks clicked in sequence, and the gate slid open, not with force, but with grace, like a breath being exhaled. What lay beyond was not a vault. It was a cradle. The chamber pulsed with warmth and golden light. At its center, resting in a bed of layered crystal petals, was the fossil. But not a fossil of bone. This was a fossil of something else, something preserved through more than time. Encased in a protective sheath of silicate and frozen plasma, the curled form of a dragon lay dormant. Its body, long and elegant, shimmered faintly beneath the layers. Its wings were wrapped around itself as if sleeping. Its horns spiraled like starlit branches, and deep in its chest a soft light pulsed, slow, steady, alive. Kael stepped forward, unable to speak. "This is the last," Valara whispered. "The final white dragon from the Age of Flame. The only one whose life core survived the fall." "Why now?" Kael asked. "Why show me this?" Valara turned to him, her face lined with sorrow and wonder. "Because it moved when you screamed." Kael blinked. "What?" "When you returned to the sanctuary. When you called out that they had returned, the chamber flickered, the fossil stirred, the pulse," she pointed to the dim glow inside the dragon's chest, "quickened." Kael swallowed, throat dry. "It heard me?" "No," she said. "It remembered you." The Order's historians gathered quickly. Scholars in layered robes, scribes with glowing pens, and engineers trained in both tech and tradition. They surrounded the cradle like bees around a bloom, examining energy patterns, scanning the pulse frequency, whispering calculations and ancestral names. Kael stood back, dazed, unsure why he was even still here. Malric joined him. "You've felt it before," he said. Kael nodded slowly. "In the Hall of Remembrance, I touched one of the crystal obelisks, and it showed you the past." Kael nodded again. "A war. White dragons and the black ones. Fire that froze. Mountains falling." Malric's expression was unreadable. "The vision chooses the worthy. The Order doesn't speak of the ancient war lightly. Most aren't shown anything." "You think I'm chosen?" Malric didn't answer. Later that evening, Valara met Kael alone in the meditation dome. The stars above the sanctuary shimmered through the open skylight, casting silver light on the polished stone floor. She sat across from him, a small, dragon-shaped pendant in her hand. "I was only a child," she said. "When I first saw a vision of the Age of Flame, it frightened me. The skies torn open, dragons roaring like thunder, ice swallowing fire. I wept for days." Kael said nothing. Valara looked at him with gentle eyes. "But I know now what it meant. Balance lost, power unchecked, flame without wisdom." She held out the pendant. "This is the sigil of the rider's line. It was passed from seer to seer for 200 generations. Now I give it to you." Kael didn't take it. "I'm not a seer." "No," she said. "You're something else. You're the one the dragon stirred for." He hesitated, then took the pendant. The metal was warm. "What do I do?" he asked. "You wait," she replied. "And when it hatches, you listen." The forge team worked through the night. Layers of crystal were carefully peeled away, revealing more of the dragon's form. Once the hardened shell was breached, soft pulses of breath-like mist began to escape, vapor from 1,000 years of stillness. They called it an egg, but it wasn't. It was something between birth and memory, a fusion of ancient biology and time-stabilizing nanocrystals, something made long before the collapse, something designed to endure. When the heart pulse began to rise, they knew the moment had come. Kael stood at the edge of the cradle with Malric and Valara. All three were silent as the glow within the fossil brightened, then blinked, like an eye opening from inside. Then it cracked. A long, branching fracture raced across the shell, humming with light. A second, a third. The shell split open, and light poured out. The dragon emerged slowly, wings unfolding like fresh silk. Steam hissed from its back as the temperature dropped to balance the heat. Its scales were pale gold, nearly white, but edged with shimmering lines of titanium, nano-bonded alloys flowing like veins beneath the surface. It blinked once, and turned its head toward Kael. Chapter 3. Born of Flame. The dragon took its first breath, and the room held its own. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was soft, smooth, deep, like wind moving through a canyon of stars. The air grew warmer. The chamber lights dimmed, not because of power loss, but as if bowing to the presence now awake in their midst. Kael couldn't move. The creature stood before him, rising to the height of a warhorse, but coiled with power far greater. Its wings were still damp, folding gently against its sides. Steam rose from between the ivory plates of its breast. Its eyes glowed, not red, not gold, but a pale silver white, like the last light on a snowy horizon. It blinked again, staring directly into Kael's soul. Then it stepped forward. "Easy," Malric whispered, hand on his blade hilt. But the dragon didn't charge. It didn't hiss or flare its wings. Instead, it leaned its long neck forward and touched its forehead gently to Kael's chest. A shock of light surged through him. Kael gasped as memories, not his, poured into his mind. He saw skies on fire, a mountain torn apart by claws of black and white, a voice ancient and kind, whispering a single word: "Return." Kael stumbled back, heart racing, head spinning. The dragon pulled away and sat down with a surprising calm, curling its tail around its feet. It let out a quiet trill, low, harmonic, and strangely soothing. "What was that?" Kael asked, his voice hoarse. Vylara stepped forward, reverent awe on her face. "The bond," she said. "It's chosen you." They named her Solara. In the old tongue, it meant sun reborn, a flame carried from one age to the next. The scholars said her nanotech-infused scale pattern matched only one recorded creature from the Age of Flame, the first Wing of Light, a dragon named Reignites, who once guarded the crystal cities before the fall. Kael didn't know what to do with that. He'd grown up fixing wind turbines and hauling timber. He wasn't a chosen rider. He wasn't anyone special. But Solara kept returning to him. When the others approached, she would observe, curious but distant. When Kael entered the chamber, her head lifted. Her eyes tracked him. She would hum, flick her tail, or breathe little arcs of mist, as if greeting a familiar presence. A part of him wanted to run from the weight of it. But another part, the quiet, still one, felt like it was finally waking up. The bonding process began in earnest the next day. Kael was given a light steel training harness, woven with resonance thread, a suit that would eventually link him to Solara through biofeedback, impulse direction, and shared memory mapping. The neural crown, still dormant, waited in the forge to be imprinted. But before any tech could fuse them properly, they had to trust each other. That meant time, long hours, flights, silence, listening. At first, it was awkward. Solara didn't obey commands. She moved when she wanted, flew when she wished. If Kael tried too hard to lead, she would simply land and curl up, refusing to move. But when he relaxed, when he opened his mind and felt instead of forced, she responded. It was like riding a thought. Their first flight was at dusk. Solara crouched low, letting Kael climb onto the lightly padded ridge of her back. The grip sockets held fast beneath his gloves. The wind whistled past the high cliffs as he locked in. No reins, no saddle. Just the soft hum of the wind and the sound of her wings tightening. "Just go easy," he said nervously. Solara looked over her shoulder and gave a sound that might have been a laugh. Then she launched. Kael's stomach dropped as the ground vanished beneath them. For a moment, there was no fear, just raw, rushing air and the impossible sense of freedom. Solara banked left, then spiraled up into the clouds, her body glowing slightly as the chill air rippled over her scales. Kael didn't scream. He breathed, and for the first time, he felt alive. In the days that followed, Solara's enhancements were activated gradually. Her wingweave mesh responded flawlessly during training flights, adjusting tension automatically when she pushed into tight spirals or glided through turbulence. Her nanotitanium claws could split stone when challenged, sharp, gleaming, and fully retractable. And her optics system, installed gently beneath the upper ridges of her eyes, allowed her to see heat, motion, and magnetic fields through layers of terrain. But her most powerful gift wasn't tech. It was memory. Not just her own, but the memory of her kind. The Luminara drakes, lost to time, still lived inside her. And when Kael slept, he began to see what she saw. One night, he dreamt of a city made of silver trees and floating towers. Dragons with wings like glass flew between bridges suspended by light. Children watched from gardens as stars drifted overhead. And then, darkness fell. From the sky came the black swarm, twisted dragons of smoke and metal. The sky cracked with fire. The city screamed, and in the chaos 2 dragons clashed, one of ice flame, one of blood fire. Their roars shook the world. Kael woke in a cold sweat. Solara lay outside, curled beside his quarters. She lifted her head and blinked. "You saw it," her gaze seemed to say. Kael nodded, heart heavy. "I think I was there." By the end of the week, the elders met again. News from the western valleys was grim. 2 more towns had fallen. Survivors spoke of black dragons carrying off villagers, of riders with spiked armor and engines grafted to their spines. Vylara placed her hand on the center table, revealing a glowing map of the region. The Ironclaw Horde's advance had curved inland toward the old forges. "They're not raiding," she said. "They're gathering something." "Resources?" Malric asked. "Or blood," another guardian replied. Kael stood at the edge of the room, Solara's warmth still on his skin from the morning flight. He stepped forward. "Let me stop them." The room went quiet. Vylara looked at him. "You are still unproven." "I'm not asking to win the war," Kael said. "Just one fight." She studied him carefully. Then slowly she nodded. Chapter 4. Fire in the Bones. The wastelands beyond the obsidian spine were silent. No wind, no snow, just broken rock and dark glass plains left from an ancient firestorm that melted the earth itself. The land here held no memory of life, only ash, bone, and the whispers of the dead. Warlord Dragon stood at the edge of the crater and breathed in the heat rising from the deep rift below. His armor clanked with every movement, scraps of old-world steel welded together with bone rivets and rune-branded leather. One of his hands was metal, a gauntlet fused into his flesh where his real arm had burned away long ago. The clawed hand of survival. Behind him, a shadow shifted. The dragon emerged slowly from the pit. Its body was massive, hunched and sinewed, with obsidian-black scales cracked by glowing veins of red. Its wings were torn in places, but reinforced with bone lattice bracing. Horns curled back like jagged blades. Its eyes burned like molten gold. Skargrim, the first reborn dark dragon, forged from the fossil remains of the Age of Flame, revived by fire, twisted by rage, and loyal only to Dregan. The Iron Claw horde had once been nothing more than a tribe of survivors, desperate, broken, half-starved warriors wandering the ruins of the north. But everything changed when Dregan found the tomb. It was buried beneath an old reactor site, half buried in slag and cursed stone. A vault locked by crystal teeth and sealed with forgotten symbols. It took him weeks to break through. When he did, he found bones, massive, clawed, perfect. But more than that, he found memory. Skargrim was waiting. Not alive, not dead. Waiting. With the help of a captured WhiteFlame scientist, Dr. Alan Kor, the bones were infused with restructured proteins, engineered marrow, and corrupted nanites scavenged from pre-collapse tech caches. It was a desecration of nature and machine alike. But it worked. Skargrim lived, and he remembered everything. The dragon's first breath had melted the steel walls of the forge dome. Its second breath carved a canyon through the stone floor. When it locked eyes with Dregan, it saw not a master, but a mirror. Together, they birthed the new horde. Now, Dregan walked with Skargrim at his side as they descended into the pit. Below, scientists worked beneath rusted scaffolds and roaring vents. Clusters of dragon eggs, black and glistening, rested in biogel pods. Pipes hissed. Screens blinked with data. Flesh and steel fused together in grotesque harmony. A second generation of war beasts was nearly ready. Dr. Kor stood at the center, gaunt and pale, arms crossed in front of his chest. His robes were torn, stained with ash and fluid, but his eyes still held intelligence and a sliver of guilt. Dregan approached. "Status," he growled. Kor hesitated. "Batch 4 is stable. Neural alignment shows improvement. They're stronger than the last clutch. But one of the eggs, will it fly?" Dregan interrupted. Kor exhaled. "Yes, but the hatchling may be volatile." Dregan turned to Skargrim. The dragon growled low, a sound like lava moving beneath rock. "Then it will suit us perfectly," Dregan said. Skargrim moved through the hatchery, observing the eggs like a silent warden. His nostrils flared with memory. He could smell blood from 1,000 years ago. The old war still clung to his bones. One egg pulsed brighter than the rest. It vibrated with power. Dark, unrefined. Skargrim curled his wing around it. He remembered this one. Not the hatchling, but the essence inside. A bloodline that had once sworn itself to the Umbra Serpents. A rival reborn. The war was not over. It had only been sleeping. Later that night, under a sky full of ash, the Iron Claw warband assembled. Dozens of black-scaled dragons, smaller than Skargrim but just as vicious, lined the crater's edge. Riders in spiked armor mounted up. Horns blew, runes glowed, engines roared to life beneath their war platforms. Dregan raised a massive axe with a glowing core. Once a WhiteFlame relic, now twisted by Iron Claw metalwork. It pulsed with stolen light. "We ride to claim the Skyforge," he shouted, "and from there the North shall burn." The horde erupted in a roar. Skargrim leapt into the air, wings shaking the ground, fire bursting from his lungs. The others followed. Far to the north, Kael awoke from another dream. In it, he saw black wings blotting out the sun. Villages swallowed by fire. Skargrim's eyes glaring straight through him. Solara stirred outside, scales flickering with soft light. She had felt it, too. Kael rose, pulling on his riding suit. The time for training was over. The fire had begun. Chapter 5. The Wingweave Forge. The forge sang with living flame, not fire from coal or gas, but a radiant fusion of crystal resonance and focused plasma. The heat didn't burn, it hummed. It vibrated through the bones and lit the skin with a soft inner glow. The WhiteFlame forge, buried in the roots of the sanctuary, had not sung like this in over a century. But today, it awakened for her. Solara stood tall in the center of the forge chamber, wings outstretched, eyes closed. Her white gold scales reflected the forge light like a prism, casting fragments of color across the stone walls. She didn't flinch as the nano-titanium gel began to pour. It started at her spine. Thin silver streams flowed from crystalline nozzles overhead, layering along the edges of her wings, ribs, chest, and limbs. The metal didn't coat, it fused. Molecule by molecule, the armor bonded to her natural scale matrix. Her hide accepted the alloy like it had been waiting for it. "This isn't just armor," said Master Corin, the forge overseer. "It's memory in metal." Kael stood behind the barrier, watching every detail. His riding harness clicked softly as he shifted. "She's not in pain?" Corin smiled faintly. "Not at all. She's embracing it. Most dragons resist at first, but this one, she remembers." Kael swallowed. "She remembers the old war." Corin nodded. "She remembers who she was." When the final layer was applied, the room dimmed. A pulse of soft light radiated from Solara's body, then receded into stillness. The process was complete. She stepped from the forge bed, wings folding naturally, her form now enhanced, but not encased. The nano-titanium didn't hide her beauty. It amplified it. Her joints gleamed with silver lattice. Her chest bore a reinforced diamond-shaped breastplate, lined with circuitry that glowed softly with her breath. Her claws shimmered like blades. Kael met her gaze. "I don't know if I'm ready for what's coming." Solara blinked. Then she lowered her head and pressed her forehead to his again, just like the first time. And just like before, Kael saw a memory. This time, he stood on a tower made of light. Around him, other riders, other dragons. Not a dream, but a fragment of a life lived long ago. Then came fire, and black wings, and screams, and the roar of Skargrim. Kael gasped as the vision faded. He stepped back, heart pounding. "Was that my memory?" he asked aloud. "No," came a voice behind him. It was Vylara. It was hers, but she's giving it to you. That's what the bond is. Not just control, but trust. The next phase began at dawn. In the open sky arena above the sanctuary, Kael mounted Solara for the first full combat simulation. His neural harness locked to her biocircuitry. Sensors lit up across his HUD, heartbeat, velocity, temperature, muscle tension. Every motion fed into his mind as sensation. It was like having another body. The first trial, a flight test through the cloud gate. High in the cliffs, 7 crystal rings hovered in a perfect arc. Wind whipped between them like blades. One wrong move would shear a wing or snap a bone. No reins, no auto-guide, just trust. Solara crouched low, then launched. Kael barely had time to breathe as they rocketed into the sky. The first ring passed with a hiss, then the second. Solara tilted her wings and folded briefly, slipping through a tight spiral before flaring again into a dive. Kael gritted his teeth, focusing not on control, but on feeling her intent. She wanted to turn left. He leaned into it. They slipped between rings 6 and 7 like a whisper of smoke. When they landed, the arena roared with cheers. Kael was soaked in sweat, grinning. Next came the live combat simulation. An automaton, roughly the size of a mid-tier dragon, rose from the far cliffs. Its wings were mechanical, its core powered by artificial heat. It wasn't a true threat, but it fought like one. Solara growled. Kael raised his arm. Let's dance. The duel lasted 3 minutes. Solara dodged plasma bolts with inhuman precision, using her optical overlays to track trajectory mid-air. Kael guided her with reflex impulses, no words, no commands, just thought. The enemy bot lunged. She ducked. Her claws slashed, metal screamed, but then it clipped her wing. For a moment, Kael panicked. Wing, right side. We're hit. Solara flared, dropping altitude, and for the first time, the wingweave protocol activated. Tiny lines of glowing light surged across the tear in her membrane. Nanofilaments wove themselves together in mid-flight, sealing the wound in seconds. She climbed again. They finished the bot with a spiraling flame dive that split it in half. Afterward, Kael collapsed on the landing pad, gasping. Solara curled beside him, chest rising and falling with tired pride. "You're insane," Kael said between breaths, "but I think I like it." She nudged his side with her snout, then curled her tail around him protectively. That night, as the sanctuary slept, a message arrived by Falcon from the outer watchpost of Velstrand. It was written in haste, stained with soot. To the elders of Aetherhall, we are under attack. They have come with dragons, not wild, not feral, controlled, armed. There are too many. They took the forge. They took our seers. They're building something, and they're not finished. Please, send riders. Vylara read the message twice. Then she looked to the sky where Kael and Solara rested in silence. "The fire spreads," she whispered. Chapter 6. The Blood Oath. The Hall of Echoes had not seen a rider's oath in decades. The chamber was built into the mountain's heart, shaped like a vast amphitheater of black stone and glowing runes. Pillars of crystal ringed the edge, each one pulsing with the energy of a past rider's bond. Ghosts of the Order watched silently from the walls, etched names, glowing softly in the dim blue light. Kael stood at the center. Above him, a beam of light filtered down from a natural opening in the ceiling. It lit the stone under his boots, forming a sun-shaped pattern. Solara crouched behind him, wings half-folded, radiant and still. Around them, the elders chanted. The ancient words of the bond song echoed through the hall, not loud, not fierce, but steady, resonant, woven with meaning older than any one life. Kael could feel the words sinking into him like a second heartbeat. Vylara stepped forward, a blade in her hand. She held it out. "Blood remembers," she said. Kael took the blade and pricked his palm. He knelt, pressing his hand to the stone. "I swear," he said, voice clear, "to guard the balance, to honor the bond, to ride not for power, but for light. The stone pulsed. His blood sank into the runes. Solara let out a soft, harmonic trill. The bond was sealed. By sunrise, Kael and Solara were already in the sky. No celebration, no feast, just a mission. The message from Velstrand had changed everything. The Ironclaw horde wasn't just raiding, they were building, taking territory, forging weapons. The WhiteFlame Order could no longer remain hidden in crystal towers. They had to strike back. Kael was given a scouting assignment. Reach the outpost ruins of Feldwyn Hollow, investigate enemy movement, and, if possible, recover any survivors. He didn't ride alone. Freya joined him, the spear wielder from the training arena, daughter of a fallen rider, known for her unshakable aim and sharper tongue. Her dragon, Nithra, was smaller than Solara, but faster. Midnight blue, sleek, and fierce. "You sure you're ready for real fire?" she asked, as they ascended into the clouds. Kael glanced over. "You're not the first to ask that." Freya smirked. "I'll be the first to say I told you so if you fall off." "Fair." The two dragons soared together through the mountain winds, riding low beneath storm banks and gliding over silver frosted valleys. Below them, rivers of fog moved like ghosts through the trees. Kael adjusted his neural band and checked Solara's vitals, all stable. Her wingweave mesh responded smoothly in the cold air. Her optics were scanning ahead, feeding him pulse data through his visor. "No sign of movement yet," Kael said. "Let's hope it stays that way," Freya replied. "Though I wouldn't count on it. Velstrand's only 3 ridgelines over." As they flew, Kael took in the scenery, ruined stone towers, broken bridges, overgrown roads from a time before the collapse. A civilization had once spanned this region. Now it felt more like a graveyard. Solara suddenly dipped her wing. Kael felt it too. A sound. Distant. Low. Wings. But not theirs. The enemy struck without warning. From the side of the canyon, a black-scaled dragon erupted from the trees, rider hunched low, armor jagged and painted with ash. It hissed, flame already gathering in its throat. Freya shouted, "Incoming! Left!" Kael pulled hard as Solara spun midair, dodging the blast. Fire grazed her flank, but the armor held. 2 more dark dragons followed. They were waiting, Freya growled, circling wide. Kael gritted his teeth. "Then let's give them something to remember." The fight was fast and brutal. Solara and Nithra split the air like blades, dodging and weaving as the Ironclaws closed in. The enemy dragons moved with brute force, no grace, no elegance, just power. But they lacked the harmony Kael shared with Solara. Together, they moved as one. Solara rolled, flipping over her attacker, claws slashing across its spine. Black blood splattered the trees below. The dark dragon shrieked and fell. Freya drove her spear into another, sending its rider tumbling to the rocks. Only one remained. It came for Kael, fast, head-on. Kael closed his eyes. Now, he thought. Solara opened her jaws and unleashed a blast of brilliant white fire. Hotter than any forge, drawn from her soul core. The enemy vanished in light. They landed moments later, breathing hard, near the ruins of Feldwyn Hollow. Freya dismounted first, scanning the area. No movement. They cleared this place out days ago. Kael walked slowly through the broken stones, eyes tracing claw marks scorched into the earth. They weren't just passing through. He knelt near the edge of a collapsed building. There, carved into the stone, was the mark of the Ironclaw horde, etched with a seared brand. But beside it, another symbol, older, a spiral with jagged lines branching outward. Kael stared at it. Solara approached, sniffing the stone. "Do you know it?" Kael thought. A flicker of a memory passed through him. Cold. Darkness. Skargrim. This was the mark of the Umbra Serpents, the ancient dragon clan of Shadow. Freya saw his face pale. "What is it?" Kael looked up. "They're not just rebuilding an army." He turned to her, voice steady. "They're awakening something worse." Chapter 7. The Cradle of Bones. Beneath the charred plains of Velstrand, something vast and terrible was growing. The breeding pits of the Ironclaw horde stretched for miles under the ruined earth, twisting caverns of steel, bone, and scorched stone, carved by fire and reinforced with machines older than the collapse. The smell of ash, oil, and blood hung in the air like smoke that never cleared. At the center, a great cavern opened into a black dome. Pipes lined the walls, humming with corrupted energy. Crystal tanks pulsed faintly, each holding a dragon egg suspended in a red-gold fluid that shimmered like molten metal. Some of the eggs were still. Others twitched. One cracked. Dr. Alan Core stood above them, clipboard in one hand, mind racing behind hollow eyes. He had once been a respected geneticist of the WhiteFlame order. Now he was prisoner and architect of a nightmare. Warlord Dragon descended the metal stairs, his boots echoing like war drums. Behind him, Skargrim moved with thunderous calm, wings dragging lightly against the stone as if reminding the room that he could shatter it if he wished. The other dragons in the pit, lesser beasts bred from Skargrim's altered genome, stirred uneasily in his presence. Core didn't look up. "Batch 5 is unstable," he muttered. Dragon stopped. "Define unstable." "They're remembering too much." Core finally looked at him. "You pushed too far. The genetic code you made me splice, fragments from the Umbra Serpents, it's not just memory. It's instinct. These creatures aren't loyal to you. They aren't loyal to anything. They wake up, and they remember war." Dragon's face didn't move. "That's the point," he said. Skargrim stepped forward and lowered his head beside one of the larger tanks. Inside, a dragon curled in embryonic rest, a black and silver hybrid with bone ridges along its spine. It was unlike any of the others, larger, meaner. Its chest pulsed with dark veins that flickered blue in the light. "The Alpha," Dragon said, "born from Skargrim's marrow and Umbra essence, the one that will tear through the WhiteFlame gates." Core clenched his jaw. "If it doesn't tear through you first." Dragon turned slowly. "Is that doubt, Doctor?" Core looked away. "No," he said. "It's prophecy." Outside the breeding pits, the Ironclaw warbands trained in the ravine. Black-scaled dragons shrieked and snapped at each other under the watch of bone-armored handlers. Riders wrestled with spike-fitted saddles, screamed orders through smoke filter masks, and fought each other as much as the beasts they were meant to command. This was not discipline. This was survival. Only the strong flew. Among the newer recruits, a young warrior named Rusk had begun to rise. Barely older than Kael, but covered in scars and fury. He had bonded to a bloodline dragon, one of the corrupted clutch born from the earlier batches. The dragon was half-mad, lashing out without reason, but Rusk tamed it with pain and will alone. He rode without fear. He killed without hesitation. Dragon watched him from the cliffs. "He'll make a fine blade," he said to Skargrim. The dragon didn't respond. He was staring off into the horizon, smoke rising in the far distance. That night, beneath the black stone ceiling of the birthing dome, one of the eggs shattered. Alarms sounded. The fluid hissed. Lights flickered. Kor ran down the corridor toward the tank, heart pounding, not in fear of what was hatching, but fear of what it meant. The dragon inside emerged slowly, wings tight to its body, scales glistening like wet obsidian. It opened one eye, pale and glowing. Then it growled, a deep, shuddering sound like thunder over frozen tundra. It didn't look around for guidance. It didn't wait for orders. It opened its jaws and roared. The shockwave knocked Kor off his feet. Lights exploded. Two handlers screamed as the dragon lunged forward and slammed its head into the side of the tank, smashing it apart and dragging its broken wings out into the dome. Then it stopped, turned, and stared straight at Skargrim, still watching from the shadows. The two locked eyes. No growl, no flame, just silence. Recognition. Elsewhere, miles away, Kael jolted awake. His head burned. His breath caught in his throat. Solara stood outside the tent, restless, pacing. "You felt it too," he whispered. She didn't answer, just turned her head toward the south. Kael stepped outside, boots crunching frost. Overhead, stars were faint. A wind carried distant smoke on its breath. Freya joined him, eyes tired, spear in hand. "Trouble?" Kael nodded. Something was born. The next morning, the scouts reported movement. 3 Ironclaw units had crossed the river near the Vale of Tuskwood. Villages had gone silent. Communication relays were dead. No survivors, only scorch marks and deep claw tracks. The elders convened again. "This isn't raiding," Velara said, voice grim. "It's a claim." "They're making a border," Maelric added, "building a wall of fire." Kael stepped forward. "They have breeding pits," he said. "They're not just waking old dragons, they're making new ones." "How do you know?" one elder asked. Kael met the man's eyes. "Because I felt it." That night, Velara sent a message on crystal wings, a call to the hidden sanctuaries, a warning to all remaining riders. The Dragon War had begun again, and this time the enemy wasn't just the past returning, it was the future, engineered and weaponized. Chapter 8. Echoes of the Ice Age. The air grew colder the deeper they descended. Kael held his torch high, the flame flickering along damp stone and ancient carvings. Beside him, Freya moved quietly, her spear strapped to her back, hand never far from its hilt. They had left their dragons above, perched on the cliff ledge watching the valley below. The stone passage beneath the ruined temple had been sealed for centuries, until now. Solara had found it. She led Kael to it in a dream. "This place gives me chills," Freya muttered, scanning the wall. Kael nodded. "It should." They stepped into a vast chamber, the Hall of Warnings. Crystalline pillars arched upward into a dome lined with ice. The walls were etched with glowing runes and faint carvings depicting dragons, hundreds of them, locked in battle. Flame and frost, light and shadow. The air held the weight of memory. At the center stood a single monolith, smooth, black, silent. Kael approached and placed his hand upon it. The stone pulsed. Then it spoke, not aloud, but into his mind. We were gods. We became fire. We became war. And the world broke. Kael stumbled back as a flood of visions struck him. He saw great crystal cities shattered by dragon fire, frozen oceans where beasts once flew, a planet turning white, clouds thickening, storms stretching across continents, mountains cracked not by weapons, but by the cold that followed. The final image, 2 dragons locked in battle, Solara's ancestor and Skargrim crashing into a mountain as a storm swallowed them both. Then, silence. It wasn't just the war, Kael whispered. It ended the world. Freya stepped closer. You mean the Ice Age? He nodded slowly. The last dragon war didn't end with a winner. It ended with a collapse. So much power was unleashed, the planet froze. They fought until the world bled dry. Kael touched the monolith again. Another message flared. If awakened, they will repeat. The memory burns, and memory endures. Kael turned to Freya. They remember it, both sides. You think that's what we're feeling? It's more than feeling, Kael said. It's awakening. These dragons don't just carry bloodlines. They carry history, and it's coming back. When they emerged from the ruins, the wind had changed. A storm gathered in the south, unnatural, swirling with strange flashes of light. Solara shifted restlessly. Nithra growled low. Something was wrong. They're moving again, Freya said. I can feel it in the air. Kael turned to her. Then we move faster. They flew for hours, racing the storm. Below them, the forests turned to frost. Rivers froze mid-flow. Villages once untouched by the war now stood empty. Snow-covered ruins with no tracks in or out. In the distance, fire. A signal beacon, WhiteFlame made, lit the clouds with pale gold. Kael and Freya banked toward it. They landed in a half-buried outpost, a sanctuary long thought abandoned. Inside, they found survivors, a handful of riders, a wounded seer, and a map. The seer, an old man named Tovar, had seen the storm in his dreams. It is not weather, he said, eyes flickering with power. It is memory made flesh, the war reborn. Kael knelt beside him. What caused it last time? The seer closed his eyes. 2 dragons, one born of light, one of shadow. Their battle tore the skies. The aftermath was frost. Kael's chest tightened. Skargrim, Solara, is it fated? He asked. The old man smiled faintly. Only if you let it be. That night, Kael stood beside Solara beneath the stars. He traced the line of her scales where armor met skin, warm, strong, alive. You've carried this before, haven't you? She turned her head, eyes meeting his. There was no fear in them, only knowing. He rested his hand on her chest, feeling the steady thrum of her core. We're not going to let it happen again. She hummed softly, curling her wings around him. Together, they stared into the night. Far away, beneath the cradle of bones, Skargrim opened his eyes. He'd seen the visions too. The battle, the frost, the end. But this time he would not be stopped. Not by memory, not by light, not by Solara. Chapter 9. The Siege of Blackspire. The horns of Blackspire rang before dawn. Kael heard them even from the far ridge, low, groaning tones that rolled like thunder through the snow-covered peaks. He tightened his grip on Solara's harness as they crested the final rise. The valley below lit up with fire. Black Spire Hold, once a gleaming bastion of crystal and steel, now trembled under a sky darkened by wings. The Iron Claw horde had come, and they brought war. Dragons circled the fortress in waves, black-scaled beasts shrieking with fury, flame pouring from their jaws. Siege beasts, tethered to ground units, hauled massive flame-casters and acid spitters. The air rippled with heat and smoke. Kael's stomach turned. "They're not just attacking," he said. "They're trying to erase it." Freya flew beside him, Nithra already snarling. "Then we don't let them." Below, the WhiteFlame defenders were already in the air, riders with silver-winged dragons soaring through ash and flame. But they were outnumbered nearly 2-1, and Skargrim hadn't even entered the fight yet. Kael guided Solara into a dive. She folded her wings and dropped through a cloud of smoke like a blade. Below them, a dark dragon cornered 2 WhiteFlame flyers near a crumbling tower. "Left!" Kael shouted. Solara banked, flames building in her chest. She released a blast of white fire that struck the enemy mid-wing. The black dragon screamed and spiraled down, crashing through a ballista nest. The WhiteFlame riders turned, saluting. Kael nodded once, then wheeled Solara around. This was chaos. There was no formation, no battle lines, just sky and flame and fury. Inside the fortress, Captain Rin held the command tower. Blood stained his shoulder, but he stood tall, shouting orders through his cracked visor. "Reinforce the east wall. Pull the medics to Tunnel 7. If the lower forge falls, we lose the sky grid." One of his scouts staggered in, panting. "They've breached the outer gate." "Collapse it," Rin barked. "But, sir, I said collapse it. We don't let them take the forge core." The scout ran. Rin turned to the map marked with blinking runes and red flare points. "Where is the boy?" he muttered. "Where is Kael?" Kael was exactly where the fire was thickest. Solara dodged a barrage of molten darts, her wing clipping a burning parapet. Sparks flew, but her wingweave protocol activated instantly, nanofibers tightening to reinforce the tear. Kael felt the pull through his harness. Not pain, just pressure. "She's holding," he whispered. "We keep going." They dived again, this time toward the inner yard, where Ironclaw infantry had breached the walls. Kael jumped mid-hover, landing hard on the stone with sword drawn. Solara circled above, fending off incoming dragons. The Ironclaw soldiers turned. He didn't wait. Blade met steel. Freya landed moments later, spear already in motion. The two fought back to back, their movements fluid, trained, instinctive. "These aren't raiders," she shouted. "These are trained troops." "They've been preparing for this," Kael growled. "Then they underestimated us." A roar tore through the sky, the kind of sound that split the soul. Kael looked up. Skargrim had arrived. Wings wide, flame trailing from his jaws, he dropped from the clouds like a meteor, crashing into the fortress wall with an explosion of fire and stone. The tower collapsed beneath him. On his back, Dragon stood tall, axe raised. "Burn it all!" he roared. Solara streaked past Kael, wings glowing, fury in her gaze. "Wait," Kael thought. But it was too late. She launched toward Skargrim, fire bursting from her throat. It struck him, but he barely flinched. The two dragons collided midair, teeth and claws raking across armor and scale. Kael sprinted toward a high perch, leapt, and caught Solara's saddle just as she spiraled sideways. They tumbled through smoke, Kael gripping tight. Skargrim followed. The two dragons fought like storms crashing together. Skargrim's claws tore at Solara's wing, but her mesh held. Solara's jaws clamped down on his neck, but his bone plating deflected the bite. Kael focused, channeling all thought into her movements, guiding her just in time to avoid a crushing tail swipe. But Skargrim was faster, older, meaner. He spun and slammed into them, sending them tumbling through a wall of flame. They crashed into the lower courtyard, stone shattering beneath them. Kael rolled free, coughing, ears ringing. Solara groaned, struggling to stand. Skargrim landed nearby, flame building in his chest. Kael raised his arm, instinct screaming. And then, a wall of white energy exploded between them. It came from the forge. A protective shield, last-ditch defense, powered by the remaining crystal core. Skargrim snarled and pulled back, wings flaring. Dragon pointed his axe toward Kael. "You are not ready for what comes next, boy." Then he turned, and the horde withdrew into the smoke. Kael collapsed beside Solara, hand on her neck. "You're okay," he whispered. "You're okay." She blinked once. Behind them, Black Spire burned, but it stood. For now, in the aftermath, Captain Rin limped to Kael's side. "You held the line." Kael nodded, eyes distant. "They're not just strong," he said. "They're coordinated. And Skargrim, he wasn't fighting to win." "What then?" "To measure us." Rin looked grim. "And?" Kael looked to the horizon. "They'll be back." Chapter 10. The Bond Beyond Flesh. Chains clinked in the dark. Kael woke slowly, pain blooming at the base of his neck. The world spun, cold stone pressed against his back. He tried to move, his arms wouldn't respond. Shackled. A sharp ache ran through his ribs. His neural band was gone, his harness stripped. Only his breath remained, and even that came slow. Torchlight flickered nearby. A voice spoke. "You fall well, rider." Dragon. Kael lifted his head just enough to see the warlord standing across the chamber, arms folded, axe propped against the wall, the flicker of fire dancing across the scars on his face. "You wanted me alive," Kael muttered. "Why?" "To talk," Dragon said. "Before the end." Kael's eyes adjusted. He was inside a stone cell, somewhere underground. The ceiling arched high, ribbed with old-world pipes and heat vents. Machinery hummed beneath the walls, generators perhaps. Or worse, Skargrim lay coiled in a chamber beyond, half in shadow, his breath fogging the air like poison. He stared at Kael with unblinking gold eyes. "He remembers you," Dragon said, "from the last life." Kael scoffed. "He remembers fire, that's all." "No," Dragon said. "He remembers Solara. He remembers what she was, what she did. She betrayed him, left him for dead." Kael shook his head. "She protected the world. She froze it." Dragon stepped closer, crouching in front of Kael. "You think you're special, that the bond between you is pure, but it's just memory, just instinct. You're a shadow of the last war." Kael stared at him. "No," he said, "we're what comes after." Meanwhile, high above the ravine, Solara circled like a phantom in the clouds. She hadn't slept. She hadn't returned to the sanctuary. She had felt the severing the moment Kael vanished. Their neural link was quiet now, cut off, but something deeper remained. A pulse, a pull, a memory not of the past, but of the present, of him. She followed it, through storm, through wind, through darkness, until she found it. A hidden iron claw facility carved into the bones of an old-world dam. She landed silently, wings folding like cloaks. Her breath steamed through her nostrils. Her claws flexed. Kael was below, and nothing would stop her from reaching him. Back in the cell, Dragon paced slowly. "You know what they're building," he said. "You felt it. The Alpha is almost ready, born from Skargrim's core. A creature not of memory, but of purpose. It doesn't remember. It obeys." Kael exhaled. "You're building a dragon without a soul." "No," Dragon said. "I'm building one without guilt." A sudden tremor shook the chamber. Dust rained from the ceiling. Skargrim hissed. Dragon turned, frowning. Another tremor. Closer. Then an explosion of heat. The wall burst inward. Solara stormed through. Her wings flared wide, eyes blazing silver, armor pulsing with fury. She roared, a sound that shook the stone and froze every guard in place. Dragon raised his axe, but too late. Solara struck with her tail, sending him crashing through a wall. She bounded forward, claws skidding, and stood over Kael, pressing her snout to his forehead. And in that moment, the bond reignited. Kael gasped as the surge hit him. Thoughts, images, light. The link, even without tech, was alive. He saw through her eyes, flickers of flame, paths through the stone, escape routes drawn in heat and sound. "Cut the cuffs," he whispered. Solara raised a claw delicately and sliced through the shackles. Kael stood, breath ragged. "I missed you too." Dragon groaned from the rubble. "You can't stop what's coming." Kael turned to him, eyes hard. "We're not trying to stop the past. We're building something new." He climbed onto Solara's back. She crouched, wings pulsing with wind. And then they launched, through fire, through stone, into the sky. Outside, Ironclaw soldiers scrambled to respond. Too late. Solara burst from the side of the dam, flying high into the storm. Kael held tight, tears stinging his eyes as the cold wind hit his face. The bond was back, stronger than before. Not through tech, not through command, through trust. Hours later, Kael stood in the sanctuary's high tower, bandaged but alive. Vylara entered, relief in her eyes. "You survived." "Barely," he said. "She came for me." "Of course she did," Vylara replied. "She didn't need a signal, or a beacon, or orders." "No," the seer said, "because the bond goes beyond flesh." Kael looked out at the sky. "She didn't just save me." He turned to her. "She chose me." Chapter 11. The Sky Splitter. Snow fell over the WhiteFlame sanctuary, but it wasn't peaceful. The flakes were thick, heavy with ash. The sky above pulsed with unnatural light, red streaks twisting through the clouds like veins. A storm was coming. But this time, it wasn't weather. It was war. "They've mobilized everything," Freya said, standing beside Kael atop the watchtower. "Every rider, every dragon, every seer." Kael nodded. Solara paced on the landing pad behind him, tense but steady. She'd barely rested since the rescue. Neither had he. "The Alpha's awake," he said. "I saw it. In the bond. Skargrim gave it breath." "And Dragon gave it purpose," Freya muttered. Below them, the fortress stirred with life. Dragons readied. Armor gleamed. Crystals pulsed. Final chants echoed through the halls, rituals not for blessing, but for remembrance. They were not riding to defend. They were riding to end it. That evening, under the fractured moon, the WhiteFlame host assembled. 200 dragons, 200 riders. Their wings lit the sky with shimmer and fire. Runes blazed across armor, lances glowed with charged energy. It was not a silent march. It was a storm of light rising into the dark. At the head, Kael and Solara hovered, radiant and still. Vylara approached on foot, her cloak whipping in the wind. "This is where it began," she said, "and where it must end." Kael met her eyes. "We're not fighting to restore the past," he said. "We're fighting to protect what could be." Vylara smiled. "Then go," she whispered, and split the sky. The flight was long and deathly quiet. Not a single Iron Claw scout rose to meet them. That was the first sign. "They're letting us come," Freya said over the comlink. "They want us there," Kael agreed. Solara's muscles tensed beneath him. The mountains opened ahead, a jagged ring of black peaks surrounding a glowing rift. In its center, the cradle of bones, now fully active, now pulsing with raw, unstable life. The Alpha stood atop a central platform, massive, coiled, still. It was unlike any dragon that had come before. Its body shimmered like oil. Its wings were translucent, humming with energy. Its tail split at the tip into twin blades of crystal bone. Its eyes glowed not with flame, but with emptiness. It did not breathe. It pulsed, a construct of memory, marrow, and madness. Skargrim hovered nearby, wings folded, watching as Kael and the army arrived. Dragon stood on a high platform, armored fully now, spine-lined pauldrons, molten gauntlets, helm shaped like a skull. He raised his axe. "Now!" The Iron Claw ambush began. Dozens of dark dragons erupted from the cliffs, their shrieks tearing across the sky. Fire lit the peaks. The sky broke open with chaos. But this time, the WhiteFlame Order didn't falter. They met the darkness with flame. Solara led the charge, Kael's thoughts in perfect sync with hers. She dodged blasts, spun through formations, and unleashed white fire across the flanks of the horde. Her movements were poetry and lightning. Kael's hood pulsed with enemy signals, left flank collapsing. Freya's voice rang, pushing toward the core. "Keep it together," Kael ordered. "We hold them here." Then the Alpha moved. One wing unfurled. It rose. Its voice wasn't a roar. It was a shockwave, a pulse that cracked stone and made dragons falter mid-flight. Kael winced. Solara nearly dropped. The Alpha took flight, gliding silently above the battle like death made flesh. Kael and Solara rose to meet it. The clash was sudden. The Alpha's strike hit with no fire, just pure force. Solara flipped midair, dodging, then countered with a blast of concentrated heat. The Alpha deflected it with a twist of its body, energy rolling off its hide. Kael gritted his teeth. "We can't overpower it." "No." Solara's voice echoed faintly in his mind. "But we can outfly it." They pulled higher into the clouds, luring the Alpha upward. Frost formed around their wings. Kael saw it then. The higher they flew, the more unstable the Alpha became. It wasn't built for high altitudes. "You're thinking what I'm thinking?" Kael asked. Solara climbed faster. The Alpha followed. They broke into the stratosphere. Above them, stars. Below them, war. Kael pulled the emergency release on his harness, shifting to full neural sync. His eyes glazed as their minds locked completely. Solara spun, wings folding. They dropped, straight toward the Alpha. The impact was blinding. Solara hit it from above, claws tearing into its chest, forcing them both into a death spiral toward the Earth. The Alpha thrashed, clawed, screamed, but Solara held fast. Kael focused. Now, Solara's chest glowed. From her heart, a pulse of radiant energy surged into the Alpha. Not flame, not light, memory. A wave of past lives, voices, bonds, harmony. It struck the Alpha like thunder, and it began to come apart. Its wings faltered, its glow cracked, its core exploded outward in a silent, final burst of forgotten time. It vanished mid-fall. Skargrim roared in rage, but his cry was hollow. He turned, wounded, and fled into the clouds. The remaining Ironclaws broke rank, retreated. The sky grew quiet. The war was over. For now. Kael and Solara landed on the scorched ground as dawn broke. Freya limped over, blood on her cheek, eyes full of fire. "You did it," she said. Kael shook his head. "We did it." The sky had split, but light had poured through, and in that there was hope. Chapter 12. The Memory of Flame. Snow melted gently across the high cliffs of Eldvar. The first true thaw in years. Kael stood at the edge of the sanctuary's sky terrace, wind brushing through his hair. Below, the trees were waking, buds of green pushing through frostbitten bark. The rivers flowed again. Life returned slowly, cautiously, as if afraid the storm might come back. But it didn't, because it was over. The Dragon War had ended. Solara stood beside him, wings folded neatly, eyes reflecting the morning light. Her scales had begun to dull in places, battle-worn, proud. The titanium along her chest still bore scorch marks from the Alpha's final strike. But she was alive. And more than that, free. The WhiteFlame Order was rebuilding. Freya now led the new guard, training young riders, many of whom had never known peace. The sanctuary had opened its gates to other settlements, sharing resources, protection, and knowledge. For the first time in generations, the world wasn't hiding. It was healing. Kael often walked the halls alone at night, hand brushing along the crystal walls. The place no longer whispered warnings. It sang of rest, of renewal. He'd see dragonlings born in the nursery domes, playful, unarmored, free of ancient rage. One even tried to bite his boot. He let it. Some memories had to be relived with laughter. A month passed before the elders summoned him, not to give orders, but to offer him a choice. "You don't have to stay a soldier," Velara had said. "You've given enough." Kael had nodded, and then he'd looked at Solara. She blinked slowly, and he knew. They were meant for more. That morning, Kael mounted her again, not in armor, not in command, but in silence. They flew low over the forests, following old paths carved by fire, now soft with moss. They passed over villages rising from ruins, children waving from rooftops. The people didn't bow. They smiled, because the fear was gone, because the sky was no longer ruled by shadow. They landed at the edge of the Veil of Glass, a sacred site long thought lost, where the final battle of the First Dragon War had once frozen the world. Now the ice had receded, and beneath it the ruins of a crystal tower glistened. Solara stepped forward, careful. Kael followed, his hand trailing the stone. There, carved into the wall, barely visible beneath the frost, were two names in the old tongue. One meant light, the other shadow. He reached out and pressed his palm to the stone. "Let this be the last time," he whispered. He and Solara sat beneath the fading sun. No words, just presence and peace. That night, around a small fire, Kael took a single page from his pack, a letter he'd written days after the war. He read it aloud. To the dragons of the next age, you do not carry the past to repeat it. You carry it to remember, so that you might choose differently. We were born of flame, but we do not burn alone. We rise together. He folded it carefully and tucked it into a small crystal chamber at the base of the ruin, a time seed meant for future riders to find, to know, to remember. Solara leaned against him, her warmth steady, and Kael, for the first time in his life, let go of the weight of survival, not because danger was gone, but because he believed in her, in the world they'd saved, and in the memory of Flame, the end.